Welcome to Life, Lafter Divorce, episode 26. I'm your host, Leanne Linsky.
And I'm the boyfriend.
And we're back this week with an all-new episode. No reruns yet. Or ever. Do most people today even know what reruns are?
I don't know. Because you just binge it all at one time, so why would you...
You don't rerun anything.
You don't go back to... Well, they know what syndication is.
Well, yeah, so...
Well, maybe they don't know what that is, but whenever you're watching Seinfeld on TBS at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's on every hour or whatever, that's syndication, people.
That would be a rerun.
No, actually, I don't think so. I think the actual technical definition of TV reruns is when they show it on the same time slot.
Oh, right.
During
their normal thing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then syndication. Yes. All right. Well, and none of that here either. You're welcome.
Yeah, none of that matters. Sorry. So
on that note, knowing it's fresh new episode every week while you're downloading from iTunes and Stitcher, make sure you stop for a second and rate, review, and subscribe. Why? Because we like to hear from you.
And if you think this is an interesting podcast that helps people, helps you, when you rate, review, and subscribe, that helps other people find the podcast.
That's
so
right.
You have to go out there and you have to rate, review, and subscribe, and hopefully help other people hear what we're talking about.
Yeah. And refer a friend. Know a friend that's going through divorce? Refer a friend. I don't know. It just seemed like the right thing to do. All right. You get the idea. We love hearing from you guys. So if you really want to write more of a lengthy thing to us, feel free. We like those too. Love letters at info@lifelafterdivorce.com. We'll even write you back.
And we have. Yeah.
Yes, we do. We do like that. Remember snail mail? Remember when you used to really write letters?
You're old, so no one else. Actually, other people listening to this are probably our age too.
Yes.
But
We're not old. We just have longer memories. So anyway, well, welcome to episode 26. It's a very good episode.
What do we have this week?
Well, this week, this week's a little bit different because in previous weeks, we've talked to people who are children of divorce. We've talked to people who have been divorced. We've talked to people who are married but have thought about divorce. And we've talked about people who've dated after divorce and dated other divorcees. Today, we have a guest who actually was a child of divorce. She's a divorcee herself, and she's dated after divorce and happened to date a few other divorcees. So check, and check, right?
So she's our target audience?
Yes. Well, it's interesting because I didn't know her full story. I mean, I knew a bit about it, of course, obviously, before she came on, but I didn't know everything. And I'm thinking about it. And okay, so going through a divorce once, it's like, okay, that was horrible. And I hope that never happens again. But like in my case, it happened again. And I lived to tell about it, right? I'm okay. So here I am years later. My life is good. And it seems almost like a lifetime to go. So we do recover and we heal. But, to go through it once and then to go through it twice, it's like, really? That's like lightning striking again. And to have our guest on today, which I thought was super interesting, was to have it happen in different aspects, to have it happen to your parents and to go through it yourself and then to be dating other people who are freshly out of divorce. And there's so many ways this can impact our lives, but I think our guest is a true testament of how you come through that on the other side and you keep going. And anyway, I just
keep going in being as positive as she was about continually moving forward. That was impressive.
It's very impressive. And because I know it's not easy. None of these things are easy. And, just one of these things that she's encountered via divorce, but to have all three and to keep on going and to come on and share her journey was remarkable. So, you know what? I think we're just going to get to the point here. So I'd like to welcome our guest. She is, again, a child of divorce, a divorcee herself, and dating after divorce. Let's give a very warm welcome to my friend, Miss Karen Beach. Without further ado. Welcome to Lafter Divorce Podcast, Karen.
Hello.
Hello. We're so happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
And the boyfriend is actually taking part in this interview today.
Yes, he
Fantastic.
is.
Yes,
nervous.
normally she does Skype things, and I don't do Skype with her. But today we're
In person.
in person.
Right. This is nice. We're
Tag
all,
team.
Yes. And now we're making our guest Karen very nervous. Creepy.
Just the, all the caffeine.
How much caffeine did you have today?
About 3 cups of coffee this morning, hit the gym, and now I'm drinking matcha.
Ah,
Oh.
I did
Yeah.
sleep 12 hours.
which
So.
kind of coffee?
Some Guatemalan from Trader Joe's.
Okay.
It's usually what I get.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're ready to go. We're going to get the info on this whole thing right here.
Really?
With all
The
caffeine.
411.
Yes, we're getting the digits, the 411. All right. So Karen you're a divorcee, right?
Yes.
You're also a child of divorce,
Yes.
and you date divorced men.
Sometimes.
She's a triple threat.
Well, for this podcast, I guess so. Yes.
Right. And in enacting the triple threat is a good thing.
Possibly.
So there you go. So where would you like to start? Maybe with your child
We
of
gotta
divorce?
start chronologically, of course.
Yeah.
So childhood.
Yeah.
Oh,
Where were you
well.
born?
Where was I born? Well, that's a little bit irrelevant to this conversation. Well, my parents got divorced when I was about 13. It was towards the tail end of us finding out that my dad actually had bipolar disorder. So that really had set off a lot of the problems that occurred during the marriage that really tore the family apart. When my parents did divorce, I've always kind of been the mature one of the siblings, so it's kind of stuck in the middle of the parents.
Were you the oldest, or?
Yeah, I'm the oldest. I have
Yeah.
a brother who's 18 months younger, so year and a half, kind of. But I guess I was a little bit more aware of what was going on, so my parents kind of used me as a pawn between them. But when they split up, I had to take on a lot more responsibilities for the household because both my parents kind of decided to venture off and do their own thing.
Who had full custody of you?
My mom had full custody because she had the house. Sorry, because she had the house in her name. So she had full custody. Yeah.
So you were 13. So at this time when they talked about divorce, were they upfront and honest about your dad's bipolar disorder, or did you find out how did that work?
I actually figured out my dad was bipolar when I was in school, talking to a teacher because I was discussing some really severe episodes that had happened at home. Couldn't really decipher them at that age, but I did figure it out. I did do some outside research, and I presented it to my mom, and she kind of verified it, but she was still very much in denial. My dad, at the time, was a behavioral therapist, a practicing behavioral therapist, so everything he did was, self-medicated and didn't really work with what he had going on. There wasn't a lot of information or technology or real, medication for bipolar disorder at that time. So when it came down to the conversation when they divorced, that wasn't at the forefront. They were open and honest about them wanting to get divorced, and my brother and I were surprisingly really relieved because we really just looked forward to less chaos in the household, less arguing, less violence, and all the other stuff.
Yeah, that's a lot to take on at a young age, especially. So
So were you relieved? Was it better afterwards, or was it still?
Yes and no. So there was a sense of relief that there wasn't any arguing or anything getting thrown around. But, when you grow up with something like that and it's familiar to you, that's all you know. Both my parents ventured out and did their own thing and left my brother and I to our own vices. My brother was still in middle school going through, his classes, and he was going to Europe for music stuff. And I was just trying to get my head back into school and sports. And I had all these advanced classes and things. And it just got to the point where things started spiraling out of control with both my parents on each other's ends. Neither of my parents were very involved throughout those teenage years. So I basically became the caretaker for my mom and my brother at like 14. And my dad pretty much just hightailed it out. So in a way, yes, there was a sense of relief for the stress that we had initially, but then there was all kinds of other things that happened. And you have to grow up very quickly at that time to survive.
That's what I was wondering. Sometimes you think it's going to be better. Better's a bad word,
maybe
but
easier.
Different. Yeah, and it turns out not to be what you think.
Totally. And I mean, we lived with my mother. I was in and out of her place, friends' places, my dad's, and my brother was between my dad and my mom because he couldn't figure out who he wanted to live with. Because, my dad had a sweet spot, but my dad's very, very conservative, very straight-laced, very militaristic. And my brother at the time was, kind of in his rebellious stage. And me, I just wanted some peace. I quit school and volleyball and all that other good stuff because my mom used to get really wasted and just fall asleep on the couch with a cigarette in her hand and date lots of different men and bring them home. But, that's getting away from that point. But yeah, grew up really early.
Yeah. That's not easy. It's not a easy transition no matter how you slice it.
No, and that's your formative years. So that
exactly
greatly affected who you are today.
Right.
How have you gone about that? How's today different? Because I'm sure you're very hyper aware of it, and you try to. I'm assuming you try to understand where you've come from and make choices that are healthier for you.
Yes and no. I think growing up very mature, like I had to be very mature at a young age. I was very aware of my surroundings and very in tune with other people's emotions and behaviors. I constantly watched, constantly absorbed. My dad always said something to me when I was a kid. He said, "You're too smart for your own good." And it was always in a negative context. It was never anything positive. But I always tried to make it a positive because in my heart, I knew that what he was saying was completely wrong. So I've always just followed my own path. And my dad's side of the family's always been very encouraging on my path. I've always been very independent. And maybe that's partially why my parents kind of backed off of me. But in order for me to, I really wanted to get away from what my parents put forth. Like, when we were kids, they were very loving, very structured. They gave us everything we needed. They provided for us education, morals, values. And then once that tipping point came, it just all kind of stopped. And so when things started to really go downhill, I made it a point to say, hey, I need to go out and get my feet wet and do my own thing. And that was really important for my sanity because a lot of people from back home, I come from a border town, a lot of people either ended up pregnant, married, dead, or, involved in drugs. And so me venturing out and just saying, hey, I need to go to school and I'm going to go out of state. It doesn't matter how much debt I, have. And that's exactly what I did. And if I wouldn't have done that, I don't think I'd be the person that I am today because I feel, I have my very, very weak moments, but I also feel very strong in a lot of ways. It's definitely affected my working. It's affected how I learn, and it also affects my relationships with, men as well as my peers. So
it's affected you, and you've went through these different segments of your life. Is it? It's probably affected you in good and bad ways.
Oh, totally. It's affected me in good and bad ways, but any of the bad ways I've always taken as like a learning lesson or something that I'd never do again. And, at this point, being 31, I've gone through quite a bit up until this point, and I can honestly say I did not have the emotional maturity to be in any kind of stable relationship after all of this happened. Going through college and working, being very naive and not having anyone to really support me and say, hey, you shouldn't date this guy, or hey, you shouldn't do this, or, you might want to think about this. I never really had any guidance,
You kind of had to learn on your own through trial and error.
But
Absolutely.
you were hyper aware of everyone around you because of what you experienced growing up, but you were never really able to. One, it's putting words in your mouth. So you said that has an effect on how you develop your own relationships now. So you're hyper aware of everyone else and trying to make sure everyone else was taken care of or whatever. They're just aware of what was going on, but that never allowed you to develop your own ability to make relationships with people, or
more so just healthy relationships with people. Growing up around chaos is kind of just something and you're okay with it. And when I went into college, my first boyfriend, the guy that I totally fell in love with, he was everything that I wanted, that I ever thought that I'd want in like a relationship, because as a young person and having this chaos, I wanted that ideal perfect marriage or perfect relationship. And
don't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I was 19 at the time, and I was wanting adventure, and I married a friend of mine that was awesome. He was a great person, but it just didn't turn out to be the best fit because I was still really getting through a lot of emotional trauma. I had a friend pass away prior to me moving out to California for school. And so going through those motions and being in a relationship and jumping the broom, if you will, it's a lot to take on. But, that was a long time ago. That was like back in 2005. So
well, we're a lot older than you, so that's it's not that long ago.
Yeah. But
that's a lot of growth, and that's a lot of responsibility at a young age to take on for yourself to make those kind of decisions and choices. But you've made some really big choices, big moves and good choices. And
I pretty much just wanted to get into the fashion industry, get my feet wet, and I had goals and I had aspirations in mind. And regardless of whatever relationship issues I had, I always focused on work. And that's really kept me grounded, because that's something that's tangible for me that I could actually see results out of.
That's everybody.
Yeah, like relationships are fickle.
That's what I was just going to say.
People are fickle.
It's nice to be able to throw yourself into something like that that can take you out of the worry of a relationship and what's going on in there, for sure.
Well, it's stable. It's something you can bury yourself
right.
into. It takes your attention away, and you can not think about all the other
stuff. And yeah, the
unfortunate side about that, though, is when you become so absorbed in that becomes like your addiction, like your vice. And when you start to neglect yourself, and I definitely just threw myself into work and school for so long, I completely neglected my own needs. And when it did come time for wanting that connection with somebody, I was still very immature. Didn't know how to decipher what from what. I ended up having more success in emotionless platonic relationships because we're both working. We both knew what, we were putting forth, and there was a mutual respect. And those kind of relationships tended to work better that way.
Well, it's also safe.
And it's safe,
right?
yes.
It's very safe because you don't have to open yourself up to that kind of vulnerability because it's probably just more physical and easy and on the surface more so than anything.
For sure. And it's not facing what the true issue is.
Right.
When I got with my, not last boyfriend, the one prior that I was with for quite a while that, we were, supposed to get married. He had a daughter, and he was going through kind of similar emotions as I was, because he had to grow up very early as well, because he had a kid in high school. And he's only like 35. She's already in high school. But when I went into a relationship with him, we both had severe baggage. So we kind of understood one another in that way. We clinged to one another, and it just wasn't healthy because we both were emotionally and vulnerable and just raw all the time. And at the end of the day, he was very unsatisfied in his life and his direction. And I was too. And it was a very devastating breakup because we really cared for each other, but we knew we needed to grow apart.
Right. Well, the thing that kept you together, that bond of having both had those tough experiences wasn't enough to keep you together until you heal.
Yeah, it definitely was enough to, break open old wounds and really start the healing process, though, because from that point forward, that's when I started to feel alive, when I moved back to Arizona after that. And I got involved with a company that I'm still with today, and I can honestly say it's what's saved me. Some people can say that, but it really has. I've grown the most with this company because I've had mentors all throughout, not just my superiors, but the people around me. I've learned a lot in relationships, business, self-conduct, health, just learning to relive my life. I feel in the most recent years, I've actually started to really come to terms with who I am and what I'm doing. And this is really the first time I've started venturing out.
Yeah, but you're only 31, so I
am, yeah.
I think you put yourself a lot of pressure on yourself, because a lot of people, at least a lot of people I know at 31 and 35, they're still trying to figure it out.
They still.
I'm a lot older and still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So
I don't even want to figure anything out, though. My whole thing is I just want to start enjoying my life instead of just working to live and living to work.
Like we said, we're gonna laugh now because we're both thinking the same thing. Like, when is that gonna happen?
We're both considerably older than you, and we're still trying to figure out work, and we're still trying to find a way to enjoy our lives. And it's just,
you just gotta take it sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just gotta take a chance sometime. Like, I finally am going to the one place I've always wanted to go to.
That's right.
Which is Greece.
She has a big trip coming up.
Yep. Just finally bit the bullet and got a little drunk and bought the tickets. It's like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I feel like I need it for my soul. I will say, I know I'm only 31, but it's been really hard to connect with guys my age or even just slightly older. And I refuse to date guys younger than me. And I don't really have an age preference, but I feel like most guys in my age group are very different. Very, very different.
How? I'm curious by this. Yes.
You have the boyfriend's attention.
31 is, I'm trying to think, I'm still.
Keep in mind, I come from a small town. I'm not from a city, so the education system's completely different. I grew up with a family in education as well as business, so the conversations that I have and the things that I'm interested are very different than a lot of people that would grow up in the city.
So when
maybe that's small-minded, I don't know, but this is just the experience that I've had growing up.
So you mean when you go home and you meet people from back home, you find that you want to date older people because you're not living in the same town you grew up in.
Well, when I go back home, there's two people. There are the people that decided to stay home, stay close to their family, go to school. Now are they have the ideal life. The husband, the family, the house, the cars, all that stuff. But then there's the other ones that ventured out and decided to do something completely different. All doing, cool stuff. But when I actually go home and meet new people, it's a completely different mentality. It's Tucson's not really that big of a city, but it's a city enough. You get a lot of outsiders. But it's still a very poor area. So education's not at the top of the chain in Arizona, Anyways, it's just my experience. I haven't really had meaningful conversations with anyone aside from guys that I've dated that are a little bit older. I think I've maybe found a handful that are in my age group.
From there or from here?
From here, there, anywhere.
Yeah. Well, so you've been married yourself.
Yeah, briefly.
So, and how is that experience for you, knowing that it could, if your past experience with divorce, going through it with your parents, obviously it's going to be much different going through yourself.
My divorce was way different than what my parents experienced because I married somebody that I really cared for, a really good friend of mine, and he was very intelligent, very decent looking, was a model, did engineering and stuff, and he had a very, how do I put this? He felt invincible to everything. And when we were having issues, he developed a klepto problem. And it landed him in jail. And that was part of the reason for the basis of divorce. He ended up skipping out and disappeared for like 7 years. Couldn't find him to divorce him. And I didn't actually get officially divorced until 2011. And that was part of that baggage that went into that last relationship with the one with a child. So it was a very different experience.
That's not easy.
No. Having to check that box on taxes, married but filing separately forever.
Wow. So when he left, I can't even imagine what you were going through for the 7 years. That's a long time. A lot of wondering.
I tried to find him, sent him multiple emails, contacted his mom, his brother, his sister. They could never get a hold of him. We all thought there was something wrong, but he would just kind of touch base every so often, not with me. But throughout those 7 years, that's part of the reason why I kept those platonic relationships as well, because I always had that looming over my head. Even if you're not officially with somebody, most people don't want to date somebody that's attached, even if it's just paper. So it kind of messes with you a little bit. Wow. I guess it kept me focused on work.
So you knew you were having problems, right? So are you okay if we talk about this?
Yeah, okay.
So when you guys knew you were having problems and he developed his klepto issue and stuff, and then he disappeared, I mean, for a period of time, I'm guessing you maybe thought he was coming back, or you had to hang on, or...
Well, at that point in my life, I was very, I was still very cold to a lot, just from everything that had happened over the last few years. So when he left, I didn't care. Like, I was mad that he left me hanging because before he left me, he decided to move in at that point with a girl he'd been seeing prior to us, officially really splitting up. I didn't know her. I didn't know where she lived. Couldn't get a hold of him. But I was pretty upset that he just kind of left it in that way. I think I was just more angry than anything. So I just completely shut off the emotional side of it. I just didn't even care. It just was another disappointment.
Yeah.
It's my own doing, though. I did take responsibility for it.
Your own doing. So
as far as us getting together and this whole marriage thing happening.
Well, it takes
live and
two,
learn.
But it takes two. So I'm curious to why you're taking on the responsibility.
I guess taking on the responsibility allows me to let it go in a way. I can't put blame on anybody else because it does take two people. But I think I had my head on a little straighter than he did. So that's why I felt a little more responsible.
So I'm trying to do a timeline here. So 13 is when things started to happen when you were with your parents, or with your parents. And then this happened when you were 19? Mm-hmm. So you had a hell of a 6-7 years that you went through.
Yeah. When I was 14, I was going into... I was going to be a freshman. So, because I actually moved out of my house and I quit school when I was in my junior year of high school. So I did a lot of moving around in that period and trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. When I turned 18, that's when I figured it out, moved in with my dad. And then all shit hit the fan, pardon my French, with him. It's very estranged from my dad from that point forward, but I moved right before I turned 19, actually. So I was 18 when I moved. So yeah, about a 5-year period.
Yeah.
Basically all of high school.
And so when you ended up getting married, how long were you married before he was gone for 7 years? Okay. So you were together how long before he left?
Like a year. We really weren't together that long. Yeah. Like we knew each other. We were good friends prior to that, but we just kind of did it on a whim. We were both, I think we were both wanting that picket fence. I mean, he didn't have the best upbringing either. He grew up in Rio and in Miami with diplomatic immunity, so he could do whatever he wanted, but he never had those parents around, and I was kind of the same way. Just, again, that feeding off of each other.
So have you talked to him since? No?
2011, when we talked about the divorce, he somehow contacted me, found me. And that was really the last time I had spoken with him. Our divorce was done within 3 months because we had no assets, no children, no debts together, nothing.
And when he contacted you, was there any explanation?
He did say that he did end up staying with the woman he moved in with for about 3 years, but he had no intention of marrying her, having children. And the family was pressuring them, and he couldn't make that commitment.
Imagine that.
Go figure. And so he hightailed it to Mountain View. And that was the last he had told me, really. He was up in Mountain View doing personal training, doing his thing. Still going back and forth from Brazil. So it was about the last I heard from him. No explanation, no I'm sorry, no nothing. We were just kind of like, at this point, let's get this over with so we can move on.
Yeah, I would imagine that's...
So to bring all that back around now, so you've had your own family, you had this with your husband, your marriage, and then the 7 years that it kept going, that you concentrated on other things. Now you're at a point where you said that you finally started, you're happy, you're doing things for you. How have all those experiences made you who you are now? And what do you,
I think what's really helped me now, I've always still kept that nurturing side because I've always, been a nurturer. I guess that's what I've always brought into relationships. Some people like it, some people don't, whatever. But I still have my nurturing side. I'm still strong. Over everything, I still have myself, and I take control of what happens in my life. I've never really let anybody bog me down. So I can say that even though I've had horrible experiences in the past, I've still held myself accountable in some sense. And so even to this day, I still feel like I still have my independence and I still have my head on straight for the most part, and my morals and like values. And those have never swayed. They can get skewed every so often when a cool person comes around, but, but still always sticking to, what's going to be best for me, because I've learned over the years that regardless of who's there for you, who's not there for you, positive, negative, whatever, you still really only have yourself. And I've really focused on keeping myself healthy. That's something I've always done. And, putting my heart into work, because that's what's going to help me stay stable.
Yes.
I mean, so many things are leaking out of me right now.
Well, what would you say out of all of this? What are you most proud? Yes, I do. What would you say you're most proud of? What trait or characteristic that you have?
Just always remaining positive throughout everything and always looking forward, but not so forward that it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Like I have to keep that sense of realism. But definitely just having foresight and just being positive overall. So
now I know you're dating. You date. Well, not like maybe
more or less,
but you keep your antenna up in case, right?
Yeah.
So
you have to have some kind of fun.
Well, yeah. So when you're out dating now, what kind of characteristics or traits are you looking for somebody? Because I know you've dated a couple of divorced men, and
all types of different men.
Yeah, all types.
You just never know what you're getting anymore. Everyone's like on drugs or some kind of alcohol, or just got like some kind of social disorder. You just never know anymore, and it's like so hard to screen people.
So yeah, so knowing that there are all these different people, because really, when you're dating, it's a chance because everybody has something, and especially at our age, we'd all like to find that perfect person with no baggage, but likely that's not going to happen.
Realistic.
That's not real, right? That's in a fairy tale. So what what would be like the top few traits that you're looking for in somebody, and how do you screen people?
Well, just picking up those signals within the first few dates. I mean, I feel like I go through so many different dates now because I get bored easy. I get so bored. And I feel really bad for people, but I need constant stimulation, whether it's intellectual, emotional, whatever. So if I'm not getting any of those key things that I need from the beginning, it's probably not going to happen. So I feel like I've gone through quite a bit of dating in the last, year. But I think being able to hold my attention is huge. I think my biggest aha moment last year was when I met somebody who was highly, highly intelligent and really piqued my interest because I hadn't had an in-depth intellectual conversation without bias and without, some kind of political or religious tie behind it with somebody. And it was awesome. It was so great. It just kind of opened up my mind. And that's definitely one thing that I've been looking for. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
However, with that comes all kinds of other issues. Well, social disorders. And that's in a way comforting and familiar to me because of my dad. And now my brother has PTSD. We just found out. And so that sense of chaos is still controlled. So it's familiar, but I'm really trying to stay away from that because it's not healthy.
So I know you've been dating a lot and you're finding all these different people and kind of sorting through, if you will, right?
Still sorting and looking. You can pick one good trait from each person and put it on a list.
So we're knowing that you need someone who can keep your attention and stuff. Where do you look for people, right? And are you looking for someone who has is it come because you have similar backgrounds, or is it because your background, I mean, you've grown up quick. You've had to deal with a lot of things, probably a lot of people your age. Well, a lot of people in general, not everybody has. So
I've been exposed to a lot too when I was a kid. I've been around, high-end things and fancy parties and I've been exposed to a lot of different things. And so I really don't care so much about a background. It is familiar. It's comforting, but I don't really seek out that familiar background because I don't really care where this person comes from, just as long as what they are in the moment, But some people just hold on to that past so much that that's all they pine on and bring into the relationship. So I have weeded out a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as looking, I haven't even really been looking. It's just people that I've met. I don't go out to bars all the time. I really honestly just throw myself into work. I just started venturing out and going out with girlfriends and taking road trips and traveling. Prior to that, I was either at home or at work. And the people that I met before that, I was 21, 22. So yeah, I partied, met a few people partying, and those usually don't turn into good things.
Well, would you get married again?
That's a good question. I've actually worked in the wedding industry before, so it's always cool and fun. And, you just start fantasizing about your wedding. But when it's when you get really real with it, it's really hard to say at this point, mostly because I'm just kind of going out and doing my own thing right now and really getting comfortable with myself and figuring out what it is I want in a relationship and with a person. It would be nice to get married, but I've found that most of my successful relationships are completely unattached. We do our own separate thing. And I don't know, maybe if I found somebody who did their own thing but still cared for me, that might work out. I'm married. I don't know. It's not really on the forefront of my mind. I've dated divorced men, and there's a lot of different things that come with divorced men. And so, as I'm getting older, I've noticed a lot more guys are either divorced or engaged or gay or whatever. Just Yeah. Just had no luck lately.
So what is it like to date a divorced man?
Yeah, because the boyfriend here knows what it's like to date a divorced woman, so you guys can compare notes.
It's a little different. I feel like expectations are a little bit higher from the divorcee.
Really?
Yeah. I feel like...
What do they expect from you?
Just they have their needs and their wants and what they're really looking for, because when you leave a relationship that's so solid, that's your foundation. You know, you have these ideals when you go into a marriage, and when that gets broken apart, you pine on the bad stuff, right? But then you're like, it's really skewed and you're like, okay, well, this is what I really want. And you go for those things. At least that's been my experience. I mean, the last guy that I dated that's divorced, he's like, I want a girl who, or a woman who is highly intelligent, but down to earth. But I want somebody who still wants to look good for me, but, you know, just silly
All
stuff.
these impossible things.
Impossible things. No. But I've also dated guys like, well, I'm not even dating this guy right now. He just kind of recently came back into my life, but fresh out of the military, divorced because he had PTSD and trying to save his kids, and he's got 2 young kids, and I'm just kind of on the fence about it, mostly because it's still so fresh. And being a child of divorce, I would hope that he would focus solely on his children and making his relationship with his ex-wife amicable so that they can grow and develop in a nurturing environment. And so far, I've seen that from him, and I feel it's awesome. I think that's so great, but it's hard to say where you fit in the picture. And since I am doing my own thing, it's going to be very hard for somebody who's divorced with young children to be able to venture out and do those things with you without me thinking, oh, well, this money that you're spending could be solely put aside for your children and their future, because I'm still thinking about the child in my head. And it's been very hard for me to date guys that have children or, you know, divorced men. Because even the guy that I dated that had an older daughter, he was still very much about his kids and whatever. And I know this may sound selfish, but because as a child I've been put on the back burner for so long, and I felt like that's where I've stood in a lot of relationships as well, I want to be number one. And whether that means not having kids or not having marriage, it's hard to say right now at this point. And I've had friends tell me, family members tell me, oh, you may not want kids in a family or, you know, marriage right now, but you might want it later when you meet the right person. So I can't really say.
Yeah. I can understand that, though. Hey, boyfriend, you've not dated anyone with children, right?
No.
Yeah.
You're the first divorcee I've dated.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the difference, is she was divorced for, 15, 16 years?
Yeah.
Before we even met. So there was a lot of time for her to get rid of all of those
Yeah.
things. But you're coming into it. I'm guessing most of these guys are pretty fresh.
Pretty fresh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's where their expectations are. And
They're still focused
dealing
on
with
other
it.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes a lot of time to go through all of that and filter things out and figure things out. But I also have dated men with kids, and it's true. There's a big question of where do I fit in, and how does this affect the children, and where do we go from here? And because the ex is always going to be in the picture at some point.
Yep.
There's always going to be a place there, and that the picture has to become bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets complicated. And especially coming from your experience, you're going to see it from a whole different point of view than a lot of others.
Yeah, there's definitely some attachment issues and like trust for sure. Because of everything that's happened growing up, I tend to put, regardless of if it's a platonic or like an actual emotional, real relationship, I always put a lot into it, whether it's emotion or just trust, not even so much finances or anything, but just I'm there like 100%, if not more. And I just always seem to be on the back burner still. But as I've gotten older, I realized that's not the other person putting me on the back burner. It's them putting themselves as number one, which is what I should be doing. And that's what I'm doing.
Imagine that, right?
Imagine that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to Greece by myself.
Which is going to be a fabulous trip.
It's going to be awesome. Laying on a beach in Santorini.
And then then it happens when you're not looking.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know about all that. It's easy to get caught up in the what ifs when you meet somebody who's super cool. And then you just got to step back and be like, okay, I'm not going to overanalyze it. I'm not going to think about the future and marriage. I'm just going to go with the flow. It's nice to be in fantasy land sometimes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think we've all done that enough to know. You know, it's not always easy to step back, and because we all have our hopes and our wants and our dreams, and
for sure. And I feel like this is the longest I've ever gone without like a real solid relationship or even any kind of platonic relationship. Because I've just been really focusing on myself. And yeah, I've had a few dates here and there, and I have some fun, but it's really nothing substantial. And I just always like to have some fun stories.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've been doing a lot of work, and it sounds like you've really taken your lessons, not even yours, but lessons from, you've learned from watching others and your parents and everything that they've gone through. And, when we get situations put in our hands, it's all about our life choices. And I said at the beginning, it sounds like you've made some good choices for yourself, and
sometimes
are putting yourself first in a lot of ways. So that's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
And I'm excited.
A lot of trial and error. A lot of trial and error.
Yeah, but you've also taken your experiences, learned from them, and then applied those lessons. And not everyone has done that. So that's an impressive attribute that you have of yourself.
Thank you.
Keep doing that, and you will eventually find what you're looking for.
Thank you.
I think everyone will.
Yeah. I mean, seem to be very self-aware of a lot of the things that you're experienced and are continuing to experience and learn. So
yeah, and I'm looking forward to the future. I may make good decisions. I may make bad decisions. I mean, I'm human.
Yeah.
And I have human needs, and the key is just to stay focused on, what it is I really want. And if some fun happens along the way, so be it. But got to be smart about it.
Bad decisions are fun sometimes. So
sometimes,
exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need that excitement.
That's right.
Got to mix it up.
Beautiful things are wrapped terribly.
Yeah.
So.
But definitely the past has really shaped the future in relationships.
So before you go, I want to ask one final question of what is the one thing that, when you look back, that you're so grateful for out of all of this?
That everyone around me has been supportive, whether it's friends or family, even my parents in their own way. Just having a really good support system to allow me the freedom to fail and to, scrape my knees and get back up and learn. Even to this day, my superiors and my peers allow me to fail so that I learn and, really redirect myself. And it applies to relationships, work, lifestyle, friendships. So, yeah.
Support system's pretty important.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah.
And one thing you said earlier was your mentors. The mentors are an amazing growth opportunity for people. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people don't recognize that and don't take those pieces of advice to heart. So it sounds like you have, and that's, again, another great attribute of yours. So
Thank you.
Yeah. Great.
I'm thankful for my mentors.
Yes.
Very much so.
Well, we're thankful that you came over and shared your divorce experience with us, and there's so much there, and I'm sure our listeners out there will appreciate, because it seems like when we talk about it that it's our own unique story, and it is, but it's amazing how many times we hear other people going, oh my gosh, that so resonates with me, and I went through something similar, or I can completely understand. So thank you so much for sharing, because out there is going to be somebody who is really, really thankful.
Yeah, well, next time you get wine and me, you'll hear the full story. The nitty gritty.
We offered, you guys. We offered.
I don't know if you could handle that one. It'll be nice.
But we did get the caffeined up, Karen. So
that's what you get all the time.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for
having
sharing
me.
everything. We really appreciate it.